Imagine working your whole life, building up that nest egg, your home, maybe a pension, all to pass on. You picture a secure future for your family. But what if a big chunk of that wealth you worked so hard for could just vanish? Not bad investments, no, but through like a silent tax hike, especially around inheritance. So today, our mission with this deep dive is really to cut through all that complexity, give you a shortcut to understanding the latest UK tax changes, specifically the ones hitting investors with UK assets, property, pensions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and we'll really highlight those unexpected shifts, like the, frankly, shocking possibility of double taxation for beneficiaries. And also get into when it might actually be smartest to start taking your pension income now, considering these new rules.
And the stakes are, well, they're genuinely high. Think about this. UK families paid over $6.3 billion in inheritance tax just between April and December last year. That's huge. But, and this is the important bit, with smart planning, proactive planning, it is absolutely possible to protect what you've built.
It really is about understanding the rules, especially as they're changing. You need to know the landscape.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's just anchor ourselves on inheritance tax, IHT. For listeners maybe needing a quick refresher, what's the basic definition we're working with?
Sure. So simply put, IHT is a tax the government charges on your estate when you pass away. Your estate is basically everything: money, property, assets. If it's worth more than a certain amount, anything above that threshold can be taxed at, well, a whopping 40%.
Yeah, 40%. That number definitely grabs your attention.
A big slice.
But what makes it tougher, I think, is this feeling of a silent tax hike happening over time.
That's such a crucial point. You see, the IHT thresholds, the amounts you can pass on tax-free, they've been frozen since 2009.
Since 2009. Wow.
Yeah, and they're set to stay frozen right through until 2030. Just to give you an idea, if that main threshold, the £325,000 one, had just kept up with inflation, it would be around £517,000 today.
That's a massive difference.
It is. So the actual value of that tax-free allowance has been shrinking year after year, pulling more and more families into paying IHT.
Okay, so let's talk about those current allowances then, because it's not just that £325,000 figure for everyone, is it?
Correct. That £325,000 is the basic Nil Rate Band, the NRB. That's the first chunk of your estate that's tax-free. Now, if you're married or in a civil partnership, you can combine those. So together, you can pass on £650,000 before any IHT is due.
Okay, $650K for a couple, and then there's something extra related to your home, right, if you leave it to children or grandchildren.
Exactly. That's the Residence Nil Rate Band, or RNRB. It's an extra £175,000 allowance per person. But the key thing is, it only applies if you leave your main home to your direct descendants, usually kids or grandkids.
So adding that up, a single person could potentially pass on, what, £500,000 tax-free?
Potentially, yes. £325,000 plus £175,000. And for a couple, that could mean up to £1 million, £1 million passed on IHT free.
£1 million sounds pretty good on paper, but I sense there's a catch, maybe. Tell us about this tapering trap.
Yes, there's always a but, isn't there? That extra £175,000 RNRB, it gets reduced for larger estates. Basically, for every £2 your estate's value is over £2 million, the RNRB allowance is cut by £1.
Okay, so it phases out.
It does. For a single person, that extra £175,000 allowance disappears completely once their estate hits £2.35 million. And for a couple, their combined £350,000 RNRB vanishes entirely when the joint estate reaches £2.7 million.
So if your estate is getting close to those 2 million marks, you really need to watch out.
Absolutely. Planning becomes critical around those levels.
And it's not just the amount, is it? It's the timing of the payment. I understand IHT has to be paid before the beneficiaries actually get the inheritance.
That's right, and that can be a real headache for families, especially if most of the estate is tied up in property, for example. It often means they have to find the cash to pay the tax bill before they've actually received the assets.
Which must add a huge amount of stress at a difficult time.
Definitely. It's a practical problem that needs planning for.
Okay, now, this next bit. This is where things really seem to be changing, potentially upending a lot of traditional retirement planning. For ages, pensions were seen as this sort of
secret vault, yeah.
A safe haven from inheritance tax.
They absolutely were. Under the rules as they stand right now, most defined contribution pensions, the common type many people have, if they have discretionary nominations set up.
Okay, discretionary nominations, meaning you suggest who gets it, but the trustees technically decide.
Exactly. That structure usually keeps the pension pot outside of your estate for IHT. So HMRC couldn't levy IHT on it.
Right. And this led to that common advice. Spend your ISA, spend your cash first, leave the pension untouched for as long as possible. It was solid IHT planning. I can picture someone, let's call her Patricia, maybe 72, house worth £500, £200 savings, £400 K pension. Her plan: live off the savings and state pension, leave that £400 K pension pot to grow, totally IHT free for the kids.
That was textbook strategy for years. But, and this is the absolute game changer that's set to change from 2027.
Okay, this sounds big. What's happening in 2027?
Well, under the current plans, from 2027 onwards, pensions will be included in your estate when calculating inheritance tax, even with those discretionary nominations.
Wow. Okay, so that just flips the whole strategy upside down.
Completely. It turns the standard retirement playbook on its head.
So that secret vault is being unlocked by the tax man. What kind of impact are we looking at for families? Is it significant?
It's very significant. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, they've crunched the numbers. They estimate just between 2027 and 2030, an extra 31,200 estates will be dragged into paying IHT just because pensions are now included. And on top of that, another 121,500 families will see their existing IHT bills go up.
So that's what, over 150,000 families affected in just the first 3 years?
Around that, yes. If we go back to our Patricia example, her £400,000 pension, which she thought was safe, it now gets added to her estate calculation. Her estate becomes £1.1 million. Suddenly, that pension could face an unexpected IHT bill of around £240,000.
£240,000 just on the pension part. That's enormous. And this leads us to what you mentioned earlier, the really brutal part, the double taxation bombshell.
This is where it gets particularly nasty, yes. If you die after age 75.
Okay, after 75 is the key point here.
Yes. If you die after 75, your beneficiaries could get hit twice on the same pension money. First, potentially 40% inheritance tax if your estate is over the limit. And then when they draw the money out, they also pay income tax at their own rate, 20%, 40%, maybe even 45%.
So IHT and income tax on the same pot, that seems incredibly harsh.
It is. It fundamentally changes the calculation about when and how you should take your pension money.
Can you maybe walk us through an example with numbers, just to see how bad that double hit could be?
Sure. Let's take a £500,000 pension pot. You die after 75, your estate's over the threshold. First hit, 40% IHT. That's £200,000 going straight away. Leaves £300,000.
Okay.
Now, your beneficiary, let's say they're a higher rate taxpayer at 40%. When they draw that remaining £300,000, they lose another £120,000 to income tax.
So the original £500,000 becomes
just £180,000 for the beneficiary. That's a loss of £320,000, or about 64% to tax.
64%.
It's a massive potential erosion. And it really underlines why, for some people, taking pension funds out before age 75, even if they don't need the cash right then, could become a vital IHT planning move.
That's a real eye-opener. And even if you die before 75, you mentioned beneficiaries usually don't pay income tax then.
That's generally true for withdrawals within 2 years, typically. But under the new rules from 2027, the pension pot itself could still be hit by the 40% inheritance tax if your estate is large enough.
Right. So either way, just leaving your pension untouched and assuming it's safe, that could be a really expensive mistake now.
Precisely. Doing nothing is probably the worst strategy. This makes planning around that age 75 marker absolutely crucial. Pre- and post-75 withdrawals need careful thought.
Okay, so the landscape has clearly shifted dramatically. Given all this, what strategies can people actually use now to try and navigate these new rules?
Well, there are definitely things you can do. Gifting strategies are often a good place to start thinking. For instance, everyone has an annual exemption. You can gift £3,000 per tax year, completely IHT free.
£3,000 a year?
Yes. And if you didn't use last year's allowance, you can actually combine them and gift £6,000 in one go this year.
Okay.
Then there are small gifts you can give away, up to £250 to as many different people as you like each year. Again, IHT free. Wedding gifts have specific allowances too. You can give £5,000 tax-free to a child getting married, £2,500 to a grandchild.
And gifts between spouses.
Always IHT free, provided you're both UK domiciled. That's a fundamental rule.
What about gifting regularly, like out of your monthly income? I've heard that mentioned.
Yes, gifts out of normal expenditure. These are exempt from IHT, provided you can show they were regular payments made from your income, and crucially, that making them didn't affect your normal standard of living.
So you need good records for that one.
Absolutely. Record keeping is key, if HMRC ever asks questions. And then there's the big one, the 7-year rule. Gifts you make above your annual allowances generally become fully IHT-free if you live for 7 years after making them.
7 years, and if you die within that time...
Then taper relief might apply. Basically, the amount of IHT due on the gift reduces on a sliding scale between years 3 and 7.
Right. But there's a catch with gifting, isn't there? You lose control.
That's the main caution.
Yeah.
Once you've gifted an asset, it's gone. You can't ask for it back. And you have to consider things like, well, what if the person you gifted to gets divorced? That gifted wealth could then be part of their divorce settlement.
Okay, good point. What about trusts? They sound complicated, maybe a bit intimidating. Are they useful here?
They can be incredibly useful, yeah. Trusts are essentially a legal arrangement to hold assets for beneficiaries. They offer control over how and when assets are distributed and can be very effective for IHT planning. Think of them as a way to manage and protect family assets, potentially shielding them from IHT while giving you flexibility.
Are there different kinds?
Several types. You have things like bear trusts, where the beneficiary usually gets access at 18. Discretionary trusts are very common here. The trustees you appoint have flexibility over who benefits and when. Then there are interest in possession trusts, often used maybe for a second spouse, where they get the income during their life, but the capital passes elsewhere on their death. And for much larger estates, you might look at family investment companies, but that's a whole separate topic, really.
Okay. So trusts offer control but might seem complex. What if someone isn't ready to give assets away yet, but wants to cover a potential IHT bill?
Life insurance is a very common solution there. You take out a policy that pays out a lump sum when you die, more often, on the second death for a couple.
And that lump sum?
It's usually paid tax-free. But the crucial step is to write the policy in trust.
Putting the policy itself in trust.
Exactly. If you do that, the payout from the life insurance policy doesn't form part of your estate, so it doesn't increase your IHT bill. Instead, the money sits outside your estate and can be used directly by your beneficiaries to pay any IHT due without needing to sell the family home or other assets quickly. It provides instant liquidity.
That sounds like a really practical safety net. Now, this next idea you mentioned earlier, it struck me as really smart, especially with the pension changes contributing to pensions for other people.
It's a fantastic strategy, honestly. It's tax efficient and helps build wealth for the next generation without necessarily making huge gifts right now. You could pay into a pension for your spouse, your children, even your grandchildren. And here's the clever bit. They don't even need to be earning any money themselves to get tax relief.
Really? Even if they're not working?
Yes. For a non-earner, you can contribute up to £2,880 a year, and the government automatically adds basic rate tax relief, topping it up to £3,600 in their pension pot.
So you put in £2,880, they get £3,600.
Exactly. Free money from the government, essentially. Think about a grandparent doing that for a grandchild. £2,880 a year for 18 years. That's £51,840 in total contributions. With potential investment growth over decades, I've seen projections where that could build a pension pot worth over £766,000 by the time the grandchild reaches age 60.
Wow. From just over £50 in actual contributions, that's incredible leverage.
It's the power of compounding and tax relief working together over the long term. A really powerful legacy planning tool.
Okay, that's brilliant. Now, amongst all these strategies, there's one thing you stress is an immediate, crucial step everyone should take. Not a full fix for 2027, but vital right now.
Absolutely. This is basic housekeeping, but so important. Fix your death benefit nomination.
Your pension.
Yes, for your pension. It sounds simple, but if you die without a clear, up-to-date nomination, well, problems can arise. The pension provider might be forced to pay the lump sum into your estate. If you die after 75, that could make the whole lot taxable as income in one go for the estate. Very inefficient. Or, even worse, we hear horror stories. The money going to the wrong person entirely. Like an ex-wife getting the pension because the nomination form was never updated after a divorce.
Oh gosh. Okay, that's a stark warning. So the message is clear. Don't put this off.
Definitely not. Log into your pension account online or call your pension administrator today. Check who is nominated to receive your pension if you die. Update it if it's wrong or out of date. It's usually a simple form.
Essential advice. Do it today.
It's a vital first step. But as we've laid out, this whole area is getting much more complex. Fixing the nomination is necessary, but it's not sufficient on its own to navigate the bigger changes coming down the track, especially with pensions and IHT merging from 2027.
And that complexity really underlines the need for proper, personalized advice, doesn't it?
It really does. This isn't DIY territory for most people, especially with significant assets involved.
So for our listeners who are thinking, okay, I need help navigating this, we do want to recommend someone specific. We highly recommend Adrian Rowles.
Yes, Adrian is a very experienced, independent financial advisor. He's based in Dubai, but advises clients with UK assets globally. He's got a strong reputation for credibility, and importantly, he's backed by a whole network of technical specialists who really know the ins and outs of UK tax, trusts, pensions, all this complex stuff.
And he offers complimentary online consultations, right? So people can have an initial chat without obligation.
That's right. It's a great way to just explore your situation and see what planning might be needed. He's easy to find online. Just search Google or LinkedIn for Adrian Rowles.
That's Adrian Rowles, and the surname is spelled Rowles. Adrian Rowles.
Definitely worth reaching out if you have UK assets and these changes concern you.
Okay, so we've dug deep into the confirmed changes around IHT and pensions, but it feels like we should also touch on the wider context. There's always talk swirling around future tax changes, isn't there? Specifically, this idea of a wealth tax keeps cropping up.
It does, and it's relevant because it speaks to the overall pressure on government finances.
Yeah.
The backdrop is that the chancellor needs to find about $5.5 billion by 2029-30, according to forecasts. And with commitments made not to raise the main rates of income tax, national insurance, or VAT taxes on working people, the question becomes, where else could the money come from?
Hence the renewed speculation about taxing wealth itself.
Exactly. The idea gained some traction recently when Lord Kinnock, the former Labour leader, mentioned it. And then the Prime Minister's spokesperson, sort of refusing to rule it out directly, just added more fuel to that fire. Caused a bit of outrage in some papers.
Right. So just for clarity, when people talk about a wealth tax, what does that actually mean? What would it tax?
In simple terms, it would be an annual tax levied on the total net worth of an individual above a certain threshold. So it would look at everything: the value of your property, your stocks and shares, savings, maybe even art, and yes, potentially your pensions too. The threshold discussed in the UK context is often somewhere around £500,000 of net assets per person, or perhaps £1 million per household.
And on the surface, you can see why it might be popular in theory, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. From a theoretical standpoint, it doesn't directly discourage work or earning income in the same way income tax does. And it's seen by proponents as a way to tackle wealth inequality. The stats are quite stark. The top 20% of UK households own something like 63% of all the wealth. The bottom 20% own just more 0.5%. So polls often show public support, like one in 2023, where 53% backed a 1% tax on wealth over $500,000.
So if it polls well and seems fair to some, why don't governments just do it? What are the practical problems with a recurring wealth tax?
Well, the history isn't great. Recurring wealth taxes have often proved really difficult and costly to actually implement and run. They tend to raise less revenue than expected, partly because valuing wealth, especially illiquid assets like property or private businesses, is really hard and contentious. Plus, to make them politically acceptable, governments often introduce exemptions for main homes or pensions or farms, and these exemptions inevitably get exploited, reducing the tax take further.
So they become leaky.
Very leaky. And that's why most developed countries that tried recurring wealth taxes in the past have now actually abandoned them.
But what about this other idea, a one-off surprise wealth tax? Could that be different?
That's the version some economists think might actually work, potentially. The argument is, if you announce it suddenly, without warning, people don't have time to shift assets or rearrange their affairs to avoid it. You could, in theory, design it with minimal exemptions. And you could allow people to pay it over several years, perhaps, to avoid forcing asset sales if they're asset-rich but cash-poor.
And the potential revenue.
It could be significant. One study suggested a one-off 5% tax on individual net wealth above £500,000 could raise something like $250 billion for the UK government.
$250 billion. That's a massive number. But even a one-off tax must have downsides.
Huge downsides. Firstly, there's the argument about double taxation. Again, people feel their wealth was already built from income that was taxed. But perhaps the biggest risk is trust. A one-off tax only really works if people believe it truly is a one-off. Given the political climate, and perhaps thinking about things like Starmer's U-turns on other policies, there'd be deep suspicion that a one-off tax might just be the thin end of the wedge, paving the way for more later.
And that suspicion could have consequences.
Potentially severe ones. The fear would be a dramatic flight of capital out of the UK if wealthy individuals thought the UK was becoming a place where their assets would be repeatedly raided.
So even though it's speculative, this whole wealth tax discussion just adds another layer of uncertainty and underscores why proactive planning around the current known rules is so important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It highlights the fiscal pressures and the potential direction of travel, making it even more prudent to get your affairs in order based on the rules we know are changing, like the IHT treatment of pensions.
Right. So wrapping this up, the central message seems incredibly clear. The ground is definitely shifting under our feet when it comes to UK inheritance and pension tax. Just sitting back and doing nothing. That's really not a safe strategy anymore. It could genuinely end up being a very expensive mistake for your family and your legacy.
Absolutely. Being informed, like hopefully our listeners are now, is that crucial first step. You've got the key insights now into these latest changes, the real risk of double taxation on pensions, and some of the strategic ways you can start thinking about your wealth.
So the final thought we want to leave you with is this. Now that you understand these new rules, the 2027 pension changes, the potential impact, what steps will you take, starting today, to protect the wealth you've spent your life building? How will you ensure your legacy stays intact?